It's time for another card review of the latest Mean Streets of Gadgetzan cards, and I think this about rounds out the first week, which the first week reveals the Grimy Goons cards. We begin today with the big boss, the Don Honcho. Is this the new Dr. Boom? It might be the new Dr. Boom. It is a Grimy Goons class legendary, which means you can only play it in Paladin, Hunter, and Warrior, but boy does it fit well there. First of all, when you add up the battle cry of Don Honcho with its stats, that's a 7 mana 10/11. And you know, Dr. Boom was only a 9/9. Granted, it is a little slower than Dr. Boom. It basically takes like 3 turns to be active, unlike Dr. Boom's 2. Of course, that's an oversimplification. Dr. Boom as a neutral and could be put into all decks, and was kind of put into all decks because the Boom bots were probably a bit too strong. It's not just a 9/9, it's more like a 13 or 14/9. Yes, it looks slow. Yes, it kind of looks like it has Boogie Monster stats, but this is no Boogie Monster, I say. I say, you boogie on, and Dawn is here to lead the party. I think it is actually accurate to say this is kind of a 10/11 for 7 in any metagame that isn't ridiculously fast. But you know what happens when you combine Don Honcho with this next card? Dopplegangster. So Dopplegangster was the card I revealed on the channel. If your Don Honcho lands on the Dopplegangster, you're getting a 7/7 Dopplegangster, which means you play the 5 mana 7/7 and you get 2 more 5 mana 7/7s, which means you paid 5 mana for 3 7/7s, which I think is just about the biggest value 2-card combo that's realistic that I've heard of. Like, this could be the new Patron. You build a warrior control deck with Dopplegangster and Don Honcho and just some big minions. You only play Don Honcho when you have exactly Dopplegangster in your hand, which I think you could finagle. Similar to how warrior control can reliably play Elise and Golden Monkey. Why not just play Don Honcho and then Dopplegangster, and maybe then after that you play Elise. I genuinely think that this will become a deck. Sure, we haven't seen all the cards yet, but with Grimy Goons, most of the cards from Grimy Goons revealed, I think I have enough confidence in saying that these buff cards in your hand, Dopplegangster decks, should be pretty good. And for both Don Honcho and Dopplegangster, they're fine arena cards since they have solid stats just by themselves. You've got Hunter with Rat Pack. The thing about quite a few of these cards is that they seem to be decent, even if you don't manage to get any buffs on them. Rat Pack was Forsen's revealed card, and I'm actually saying pretty much exactly what he said here, but you compare it with Infested Wolf. It is 1 fewer mana for 1/1 fewer stats, and you still summon the 2 1/1 beasts. They're rats instead of spiders. But where Rat Pack is insane is if you get your 3 mana Shaky Zip Gunner on it, then it's a 3 mana 4/4, and then you summon 4 rats when it dies, and that's really good. I think that Rat Pack is going to be a staple in any of the Hunter decks which buff your cards in your hand. And even if not, it's a decent card. I don't think that it will be put into a deck without synergy. Worth mentioning. The Hunter 3 cost slot is pretty competitive. I think this kind of buff your cards in hand mechanic might cause some waves in the usual Hunter deck. You might see a few of the cards you always see on Hunter get swept aside for these cards. Unlike other cards where you need to buff the cards in your hand, Rat Pack can actually get buffed while it's in play too, with Abusive and Houndmaster. Turn 3 Rat Pack, turn 4 Houndmaster. Get your 4 rats, that's pretty gross. Pretty good. This next card is card that I think is really good with buff your hand cards. Dispatch Kodo. 4 mana 2/4, deal 2 if you just play it by default, but you buff this by just 2 and you've got a 4 mana 4/6, deal 4 damage. Seeing these cards is kind of cool because it lets you see just the different flavors of Grimy Goons you can have. So you run your Dispatch Kodo, you run your Rat Pack, or you can put it in with like smaller cards that get buffed like Paladins, because small cards getting buffed is a way better outcome than big cards getting buffed, since it raises the small threat into a medium or high threat. Or you can even do the combo route of just buffing your Doppelgangster. So I'm actually fairly optimistic about this buff your cards in your hand mechanic. And even if it is random, maybe you control the randomness by having all cards that are good to be buffed, or mostly cards that are good to be buffed. Hunters currently don't actually have that many good 4-drops. They have Houndmaster and they have Infested Wolf. Infested Wolf was never that good. And Houndmaster is good, but you don't want to play it on 4, so this gives Hunters a solid 4 mana play. I think this card is potentially good even if you don't buff the card while it's sitting in your hand. And it's a beast, so you can Houndmaster it. A really easy comparison of this card is with the old Keeper of the Grove. Some of you newer players might not have seen that card for a while. Some of the older players might have forgotten completely that Keeper existed. But that was a 4 mana 2/4, which dealt 2 damage when it came into play. And that was run in pretty much every single Druid deck. Now granted, the Silence utility was also pretty strong on it. Perhaps it'll kind of knock Infested Wolf off because Rat Pack will take its place and Dispatch Kodo will be here as well. It's very good. In Arena, it's great as well, even if you don't have as much synergy as in Constructed. And finally, we got Knuckles. The 5 mana 3/7 stat line is decent. It has been compared to Cobra Shot. In addition to doing 3 damage to both an enemy minion and the hero, you're also getting a 7 health minion with it, so man, huge Cobra Shot buff. Something that may not be apparently obvious is this card is also really good with buffing the cards in your hand, because if you buff Knuckles, you're kind of dealing double damage each time you attack. You're attacking a minion and you're attacking the enemy hero at the same time, so pa-pow! This card is a bit more questionable than the other 2 cards in terms of its constructed viability, because the other 2 cards were like good baseline even if you didn't buff them. Knuckles, 5 mana 3/7, it's like, perhaps just a little bit too soft. But a very amusing card for Hunters, because yes, you always go face. Fun fact, by the way, I'll give you a quick sneak peek of Brass Knuckles. If you add the Brass Knuckles stats of a 2/3 to a Silverback Patriarch, you actually get 3/7, because it's actually a Silverback Patriarch with Brass Knuckles on it. Wow. Alright, Paladin cards. Some people were disappointed that the Murloc art happened to be on this one instead of having more Murlocs, but it's a Smuggler's run. The Murlocs are smuggling some goods, and you're giving all the minions in your hand +1/+1 for 1. It reminds me quite a bit of the Druid card, which gives all the minions in play +1/+1, but you're just doing this preemptively. That's actually kind of easier to do because the cards in your hand are safe and you can guarantee buffing them. Potentially good in combination with grabbing a bunch of minions with small-time recruits and then putting them on a Smuggler's run. It's kind of like 1 mana buffing 3/3, which is kind of good. I mean, if you buff just 3 minions, which I think is a very realistic situation. When you think of aggro face Paladin, you typically thought of them like starting the pressure on turn 1 with an Argent Squire. Like, what if you start with Smuggler's run, and then you curve up to the new 2-drop of Grimestreet Outfitter, which is a 2/2, and then you give the other cards in your hand a buff. You're getting 2/2 on your +2/+2 on your turn 3 now. What if you follow up with the Wicker Flame Burn Bristle from this set? That's a 3 mana 4/4 Divine Shield. Taunt damage dealt by this minion also heals your hero. So, wow. I mean, I just laid out the perfect situation, but yeah. It should be mentioned that, yes, most of the cards that giving your hand +1/+1 or buffing your hand, it's a slow mechanic, but I feel like the cards have been costed appropriately or aggressively enough that even the baseline stat minions are decent enough to play on curve, so you don't fall too far behind by playing these cards. I think it holds a lot of possible viability. If you thought dealing with Shielded Minibot on turn 2 was bad, you play Smuggler's Run on turn 1, and then you play 2 Argent Squires on turn 2. And then you have 2 Shielded Minibots on turn 2. Wow. I think when you think about these cards with the Grimy situation, it lets you visualize the possibilities of the cards more vividly. Grimestreet Protector. So when we're looking at this card, first of all, we have to think about how much a 6/6 minion with Taunt is worth. And I think it's worth pointing to Dark Arakoa. Dark Arakoa is a 6 mana 5/7 with Taunt. That stat line is a little bit better, or maybe even a lot better than a 6/6, but not that much better. Your battle cry is giving your adjacent minions Divine Shield. You can also look at the Force Tank Max, which is an 8 mana 7/7 with Divine Shield. Doesn't have Taunt, which actually is kind of important. It's surprisingly important to have Taunt. The key is, of course, trying to give your adjacent minions Divine Shield. Difficult to imagine what deck this belongs in. It's tough to get 2 minions in play in a deck which plans on playing a 7-drop. But yes, if you manage to have 2 minions in play and then you play Grimestreet Protector and then you attack with them, that's really strong. You always can just hit the button and then play Grimestreet Protector on 9 mana, and then you're getting the 1/1 Divine Shield at worst. I think this is the exact type of card that I like seeing. It has interesting text on it, it's costed fairly, but it's not costed at such an extent that it seems like it's just an easy gimme. It has a interesting stat line and an interesting mana cost. It's not trash. It doesn't seem ridiculously good. It rewards you for planning ahead and getting like 2 minions on the board somehow. Excellent value if you manage to get it on 2 guys. It fills out an important mana cost as well, because on 7, there's not really much out there. And that in itself also gives Grimestreet Protector a major boost, because when you're looking at mana, you want to use up all your mana each turn. That's easiest if you just spend the mana in the top left. It's entirely possible that Grimestreet Protector will make it in as a one-of, put it in as a finisher, similar to Tyrion Fordring. I think it's quite an interesting card. And finally, we've got the warrior cards. Grimy Gadgeteer. At the end of your turn, give a random minion in your hand +2/+2. I thought it was good enough, even if you didn't. Even if it was just a battle cry, because that's like a 4-mana 6/5. It's a constant threat. Absolutely insane. Maybe they didn't kill your Grimy Gadgeteer. It seems unlikely that they would kill your Grimy Gadgeteer, because it's along the same threat level as Bran Bronzebeard. Every single turn you're getting a minion buff by +2/+2. That's really powerful. So this card's gonna see play. I wonder if it'll see play in Dragon Warrior, if it's that strong. You just go in lieu of like stats. And of course in Dragon Warrior, some of your minions at least charge. It's really good. I feel like this is definitely a shoe-in for mid-range Warrior at least. Control Warrior, maybe it's good enough. Certainly in Buff Your Hand Warrior. Certainly in Dopplegangster Warrior. And Brass Knuckles. When you compare this with Grimy Gadgeteer, it certainly looks a lot less exciting. So a 4/3 card, how much is a 4/3 card worth? Maybe like 2.5 mana. How much is a 2/3 weapon worth? Maybe like 2 mana. Kind of win for Grimy Gadgeteer, the base is like a bit better. When I think about it, Brass Knuckles and Grimy Gadgeteer are more similar than I thought, because you're attacking the turn that you play Brass Knuckles. You attack the turn after that. So that's kind of like getting 2 +1/+1 buffs. So you just have like a 2/3 weapon instead of a 4/3. And you have even one more boost after that. I actually don't think it's as bad as it looks. The 2 mana 2/3, we don't actually have a weapon with that stat line yet, but I think that would be about right. If you assign 2 of the 4 mana on the Brass Knuckles as this, you're paying 3 mana for like +3/+3 buff. I was thinking that Stolen Goods is kind of reasonable, which you're paying 2 mana for +3/+3. And naturally, when you're combining 2 cards together, is a better card because it's like 2 cards in one. So it's like if you played Stolen Goods and it said draw a Fiery War Axe. So through that convoluted line of thinking, I'm saying that Brass Knuckles is not as bad as it looks. What if you put this in the Warrior control deck, which tries to like just get out a huge Dopplegangster? Then you play your Brass Knuckles, you try to hit only at times where you're buffing your Dopplegangster. You're getting 3 +1/+1 boosts on Dopplegangster eventually. And it's true you can upgrade it, but I actually think upgrading it might not be that practical. But there have been cards revealed already, has been a card revealed already, which actually you even have it on curve. You play the Grimestreet Pawnbroker on turn 3, it buffs the Brass Knuckles, you play your Brass Knuckles, it's a 3/4. That could be something. Anyways, I'm just saying, before you dismiss the Brass Knuckles, when you compare it with the Grimy Gadgeteer, which, Grimy Gadgeteer I think just looks really strong, I think Brass Knuckles should look perhaps not as strong, but similarly strong. This kind of early review was said by the man who saw some potential in Tentacles for Arms, and that's fair. It is Tentacles for Arms-esque as well, because one can make the argument, I'll argue on the other side too after hyping it up. 2 attack on turn 4 is like almost nothing. Look at all the bling on the Knuckles too. But yeah, they're usually using it in combination with something else. It's possible it's just too slow. But it's also possible that if the metagame gets slower, and I actually think the metagame will get slower, you'll get the full value on Brass Knuckles, and it's faster than Tentacles for Arms. That may not sound like much, but it is faster than Tentacles for Arms. How about that?
Now who's got the upper hand?